All good things come with time, and much like the Aranara questline, this video took me way longer to finish than I was anticipating. But we're finally back at it again with Genshin Impact to discuss which visions the cast of Twisted Wonderland might perceive if they were to exist in that universe. The last video sparked a lot of interesting discussions, and many of you lovely viewers revived some of my long-lost memories regarding this game. While this has helped me consider these elements from some new angles, my knowledge of the lore is still very incomplete. This video will also be riddled with lore inaccuracies. I have not played much of Fontaine or any of Natlan, and I'm considering finishing up Fontaine's story quest in a future stream, so I didn't want to spoil myself by diving into the lore too deeply. Even still, I'm sure y'all will have a wonderful time with this thought experiment as long as you take my choices and reasonings with a grain of salt. Just like last time, we will be talking about both games and their story contents, so consider this your spoiler warning for both. Now then, let's pick up where we left off with Scarabia Dorm and its Vice House Warden, Jamil Viper. Jamil 110% is getting an Electrovision. You cannot change my mind, though you're welcome to respectfully try in the comments. Jamil is cunning, intelligent, and can scheme like no one's business, but all of these things are done with pinpoint accuracy. Electro, like all of the elements, sparked a lot of debate over its supposed meaning and the concept of eternity, and I think I might need to clarify what I meant previously within Jade's section. Because I mentioned that eternity by its very nature is limitless. There is no time limit within eternity, which means it doesn't have to be rushed. And I think this was taken as not needing to act at all due to the limitless time, but that is not what I meant, nor what Jade, and likewise Jamil, does. Lightning may only strike once and for a brief moment, but it does so with accuracy and precision. However, it also requires very specific conditions to be met in order to form, which can take time. Waiting for this moment might take an eternity, but the cosmos has to craft that perfect storm. It has to create the required conditions, and that requires the cosmos to be acting. Waiting for the autumn leaves to fall takes an entire year, and yet every leaf that's whisked away by the wind is a brand new experience, a fleeting moment, one you can only witness by ensuring you're at the right place at the right time. And you can't do that if you don't get your butt out of the house and into the forest. But that also doesn't necessarily mean you need to rush out of the house either. Naturally, if you wait too long, the leaves will be gone, so it is a bit of a balancing act. But the overall moral of this spin on eternity is that one must always be willing to act to create the circumstances required to achieve their goal, no matter how long that takes. Your actions do not need to be expedited, but they do need to happen, and I think that's something that these kiddos do exceptionally well. It's in this vein that I see Jamil resonating with this element, as he's constantly trying to change his future by subtly manipulating his reality. In Book 4, Jamil's goal is to strike down Kalim, but he knows that he can't do that under normal circumstances. So rather than wait until the end of eternity for the circumstances to arise, Jamil slowly, steadily, and carefully creates what's needed to achieve his goal. He's not rushing, he's not overeager, but he's still moving. And he's still compiling all of these fleeting moments into one catastrophic scene. Of course, he doesn't succeed due to our interference, but Book 4 isn't the only time that we can see Jamil doing this sort of manipulation to try to achieve his goals. In his Beans Day vignette, Jamil carefully crafts a reality that ensures Kalim gets caught by the monster team. He actively chooses things that, despite his limitations as a retainer, will guarantee the desired outcome, even though some of those things, like shawarma, require lengthy preparation time. There is a lot of thought put into how to get from point A to point B, to be able to strike quickly and efficiently when the time comes, all the while knowing that another opportunity like this won't be coming along anytime soon. The moment is ephemeral, but it can only be seized if one is willing to act on it. And this is where I think Jamil excels as a character and why I think this element just suits him so well. Even in Glorious Masquerade, Jamil makes great use of the opportunity he's afforded by being trapped with Ruggy. He understands the limited time window they have, and knowing Ruggy, Jamil is able to craft a manipulative plan to ensure his goal of not being consumed by flowers is achieved. This situation doesn't have the same methodical, eternal, limitless time, but it does require careful actions to create the desired outcome. There is consideration of time and place of the people involved, something that requires a view of not just the here and now, but all that was before and what can come after, a perspective that Jamil proves he has, which is why I'm very confident in giving him an electrovision here. Kalim, to likely no one's surprise, is receiving a hydrovision. He's bubbly, happy, and has the special magic of Oasis Maker, which I'd like him to retain in this universe as well. I also think there is a surprising depth to his character that a lot of people overlook due to his happy-go-lucky exterior. A depth that I think resonates a bit with Hydro. Perhaps it's his own personal form of justice or his genuine desire for folks to be the best version of themselves that resonated with this element. I'm not sure. But it's here now, and Kalim is making the best use of it by creating kaleidoscope rain for his parades. Hydro is the element of justice, of course, but it also was mentioned that this element can be tied to strict adherence to a moral code, whether it be personal or societal. And I think this piece of the element really suits Kalim. For all intents and purposes, he seems like he goes with the flow, ever the social butterfly. And I think this fluttering nature can also work with water, since water too flows wherever and takes the shape of whatever container it's placed in. However, Kalim is also an individual who prioritizes seeking the best in people, having faith in others regardless of circumstance, and even in dire situations, he holds on to this ideal. In Playful Land, Kalim continues to hope that Ernesto can be reasoned with and convinced to let the puppets go, that there has to be some sort of good inside of him, and Kalim holds on to this conviction until the very end. Even in Book 4, Kalim is unwilling to give up on Jamil, even after getting thrown to the ends of the realm as Jamil overblots. Kalim very strictly adheres to this law of his own creation, this need to see others as capable of good. And while this need may have been born out of trauma, isn't that how almost all visions are formed? Are they not granted in a moment of dire need, either physical or emotional? At least from my recollection, this seems to be the case, although there was at least one individual who just kind of got it and shrugged it off. I can't exactly remember who that was. But in a lot of other examples, like Hu Tao, like Chi-Chi, a moment of dire need is when their desires manifested so strongly that their visions came to be. Kalim, for his part, likely desired to help whoever was threatening him, whoever poisoned him, and this belief in others, I think, inspired this Hydro vision to form. Not only is it very useful for the climate of the Scalding Sands, but I think it reflects Kalim's own ideals of justice rather well, and I don't see him ever truly giving up this mindset even if he learns to be a bit more discerning. Epel, though, is a pyro bro through and through. He is too spicy to be anything else. He's got that passionate burning within him for all things harvested and all things fistfight. So I think it's only fitting to give him some literal fire to aid him on his journey. A lot of you lovely folks pointed out last time that pyro is also an element that is tied to legacies and family life, and I think these themes resonate super well with Epel. He is, first and foremost, a country boy, with all of his priorities lying in Harveston. Epel cares so deeply about his hometown that he's been studying all sorts of potions and concoctions while at NRC, so that, when he returns home, he can revitalize the farming industry. Apples are Harveston's legacy, in a way, so I think his passion for keeping the industry not only alive but thriving also ties him directly to the legacy of the town. Heck, he even gets summoned spectrally in Tapis Rouge when the waiter mentions the desserts are made with Harveston apples, and if that is not commitment to this legacy, then I don't know what is. Epel's also got a huge family who are all very tight-knit, plus the town itself is a very close community. The Sledathon event, where we find out this information, has so many ties to ancestry, lineage, community, and tradition, it's really not even a question. Traditions are oftentimes considered synonymous with culture too, making the Sledathon no different and yet another reason for Epel to have this pyro vision. Epel not only participates, but spreads the joys and sorrows of this event with several folks from NRC, promoting his hometown and talking about how much he loves it along the way. It's an event that even gets a member of Epel's family, Marja, involved. Since I've never played Natlan, I don't really know to what extent the family and legacy aspects are emphasized. However, with Epel, I don't even think that matters. He's so deeply connected to his roots and he's so deeply passionate about them that I think he'd get a pyro vision just on principle. Couple this with his fiery passion for life, for scuffling with anyone no matter their size, and for defending those he cares deeply about, I doubt there would be another vision quite as perfect. So now we've got Rook, the bard of the group. What vision could he possibly get that would align with his charismatic, artistic, poetic, arrow-shooting ways? Animo? Precisely, but not for the reasons you may think. Rook wasn't always the extroverted, charismatic stalker he is today. No. In fact, when he was younger, he was a bit lost. Rook is rather reluctant to talk about his past, growing uncomfortable when Sebek tries to pry in Spectral Soiree. We have no idea if the story he shared with Sebek about being lost in the jungle is true, but we get very clear evidence that the past is not a place that Rook likes to dwell in. The whys and the hows are a mystery, but I speculate that being part of a larger family with so much going on might have led to Rook falling through the cracks, and as a result, he may have been a sad boy, or at the very least, a boy without a sense of purpose. That was until Nej. We find out in Rook's Vampire SSR card that when he first saw Nej on stage, he was pulled out of his funk and resolved himself to be an admirer of beauty. There was a shining light for Rook to follow, for him to protect in his own way, but a light that he knew he couldn't mess with lest he end up snuffing it out. This vision then likely manifested soon after or during Rook's aesthetic awakening, as this moment was what set him on his quest for beauty. This moment freed Rook from the shackles of indecision by giving him a goal to work towards, and I think this experience in a way brought the Rook that we know to life. He wants to observe beauty from the outside, he wants to consume it, and he wants that experience to be pure and uninfluenced. This is part of the reason that he doesn't step in to save Vil from himself throughout Book 5, because to do so would be to change the evolution of Vil's beauty, forcing it to be something that fits Rook's ideals rather than Vil's, and would step on Vil's freedom to choose in the process. That would be counter to what Rook stands for, to what he's been working towards. It would completely demolish his goal. It is in this way that I think Rook exemplifies the ideal of freedom. After all, what is freedom if it's demanded of you by a god? And what is beauty if it's demanded of you by onlookers? So for this philosophical conundrum, I think Rook deserves an animo vision. Vil, though, perhaps unsurprisingly, is getting Electro as his vision. Not just because purple works super well with his aesthetic, but because he is driven towards a singular goal, beauty, and he is laser focused in this pursuit. I suppose you could also make the argument that he has more than one goal, as he also wants to be a model, actor, superstar, and all of that jazz. But at the end of the day, those goals all require beauty, so are they truly that different? Yet regardless of the specifics, Vil is making sure his actions reflect the reality he wishes to obtain, steadily moving towards a goal that is ephemeral on the surface but eternal in concept. There is a time limit on physical beauty, at least according to society, and yet beauty itself transcends time when viewed through a certain perspective. The light shining through the trees, the storm on the horizon, the beat of a butterfly's wings, all of these things are beautiful, no? Each and every one of them is limited to the moment they occur, and yet the circumstances reoccur every so often, creating a brand new experience with the same thread. All of them beautiful, but none of them the same, eternal and fleeting all at once. And I swear I'll be getting this script back from Rook soon, but before I do, he would like me to point out that every action Vil takes in pursuit of his goals could be considered an act of beauty in this way. It takes but a fleeting moment to put on cleanser, and yet the action has an impact that outlasts. Perhaps not for eternity, but for much longer than one is likely to give it credit for. All of Vil's actions are like this, intentional moments meant to craft something larger, to accomplish something bigger, something that will hopefully stand its ground for longer than it took to create. And in a way, I think Vil represents the concept of eternity well. Even when acting with these intentions, Vil often has to wait for his results. Putting on that cleanser isn't going to immediately perfect his skin. He's got to continuously and tirelessly work on it. A Sisyphean task for sure, but one that he can only do in this moment, in this ephemeral time. and he's not going to let that slip through his grasp. Contrary to the aforementioned Electro compatriots, I feel like Vil doesn't wait for his machinations to create the perfect storm. Instead, he understands the importance of the moments themselves in a way that I don't think is fully clear with individuals like Jade or Jamil. These little moments combine to create his ideal reality due to his actions, but it really feels like Vil is more concerned with ensuring that he doesn't waste the fleeting, rather than the end goal specifically. He's very concerned about the work that goes into effort rather than the result itself, and I think because of this, Vil's way more successful in ensuring his future is what he desires it to be. If nothing else, Vil does have that proper aesthetic resonance, so I think that also works in his favor too for his little Electro vision. So what about Ortho, our first of the Shroud brothers, the android who gained sentience, and who through that process also gained life? Freedom from his code, one might say. Enough freedom to perhaps earn him an animo vision? I don't think so. Despite the very clear parallels between Ortho and the Wanderer, I don't think their core motivations are similar enough for Ortho to be tied to the same element. Nor do I want to equate these characters on basic superficial ties like android and becoming a real boy. I think instead, Ortho is tied way more to the familial and legacy aspects of the Shrouds, given his deep desire to help Idia, to be the little brother he needs, and to free his family from the shackles of their curse. Therefore, Ortho is instead getting a pyro vision here. In many ways, Ortho embodies the bright light of fire in his extroverted nature, and I can see him getting along with like-minded folks such as Bennett, Tao, and Yan. A lot of pyro users that I'm familiar with tend to look on the bright side, and their passions for their respective pursuits are like an all-consuming fire. They may not have as much direction or intention as, say, Electro, but they are absolutely going to shine all the same. Ortho is like this in many ways, as he doesn't really let the limitations of his android nature prevent him from learning about organic life forms or stop him from doing what he perceives to be right. There is an infectious optimism in his actions regardless of the probability, which does culminate in him wreaking havoc on Styx, but also in his sentience gaining, and all of those emotions were linked to his family. Ortho wanted Idia to be free, for his family to not be burdened by their curse, and if there was even a minuscule percentage chance that that would happen, then he was going to go for it. I imagine that this vision would have awoken with Ortho after the events of Book 6, which would have been even more of an indicator to Idia that this Ortho is very much alive. Idia, on the other hand, is going to be a cryo user, which is fantastic because he can naturally temperature control his electronics to make sure they're always performing at their peak. In fact, I think this vision would have manifested when Idia was attempting to recreate Ortho, his desire calling out into the ether, resonating with cryo, and from that power, android Ortho would have been given life and Idia would have been given his vision. One of the key aspects of this element that was brought up quite heavily in the comment section discussions was loss, and Idia is perfectly suited to this. He lost Ortho physically, but with this he also lost his adventurous spirit, his ability to see things in a more positive light, and with him also being tied to the underworld, there is a connection to duty as well. To me, cryo folk seem to have a love that is outside of themselves, since love in English can mean so many different things, and since we've not met the cryo Archon, we have no idea what kind of love she was meant to have had or what love resonates with the element currently. However, there are several examples of cryo users being tied to a duty of sorts, a duty that is outside of themselves, and this can be described as a love for others. The Fatui under the Tsaritsa's leadership are all also dedicated to a singular goal, at least in theory, and this sense of duty is something that I can see being reluctantly tied to Idia. He doesn't really have a way out of the Styx directorship at this point in time, and I think that this plays into a lot of his dread, but I also think it could tie him to this element through the aforementioned version of love. Perhaps him being so reluctant with his predetermined path is what ties him to these ideals, as the Tsaritsa is supposedly challenging the Heavenly Order, which is meant to define the Archon's actions, right? yet for the time being, both she and Idia have to play along to a degree, while searching for loopholes. Perhaps these things don't have anything to do with the cryo element itself, but they are thoughts I had that were tangential to cryo, and since Idia very clearly experienced loss, I think this is a fine enough vision to give him here. First up in Diasomnia is Sebek, who is absolutely, unequivocally, an electro guy. His last name is Zigvolt. He turns himself into lightning with his special magic, and he is so dedicated to his lord and savior Malleus Draconia that you might as well call him Kujo-Sara. This guy is the embodiment of what I imagine electro-vision folks are, driven towards a goal or purpose, passionate but with accuracy, and they are ruthlessly focused. Sebek also takes every opportunity he can to train, to refine his strength, all in service of his goal, serving Malleus. All of his actions are meant to create the perfect storm, to be the best retainer possible, and as previously discussed, this aspect of these types of characters is something that I associate with this specific element. Now, Sebek is very loud in his actions and honest with his intentions, which is very different from our other Electro users, except for maybe Vil. But he has the same hardworking nature that's also a little self-serving. Whatever task he's given, he finds a way to do it and do it well, completely focusing on it as if it is the most important thing in the world. This, too, I think is very similar to how lightning strikes, since it does so quickly and with precision, but only in one little area. In Sebek's labware vignette, he spends the whole day laser-focused on fixing Malleus's lab coat, doing everything within his power to ensure that that stain is removed. In his outerwear vignette, Sebek is completely and utterly devoted to finding the Lantern Blossom solely to prove his worth as one of Malleus's retainers to Leona because Leona disregards him. And that was taken so personally by Sebek because it also tangentially, apparently, insults Malleus. And even in his PE uniform vignette, Sebek is entirely convinced that Lilia's optimal nutritional dish is the only way to obtain muscular enlightenment. In fact, it is the best way. How could you possibly ever think about... Oh, wait, it wasn't. It was a joke. Oh, well, that's awkward. Sebek has no peripheral vision. He has Malleus vision. And every goal he undertakes has that vision in mind, which is very Electro, no? So that's what he's getting here. Silver, though, is a soft boy who is getting added to the Animo squad because while he is oblivious to his tragic backstory for most of Twist's main story, or at least to the finer details of such a thing, I think the thread of escaping his fate, escaping the predetermined story, and thusly obtaining freedom, is something that resonates with his character. I also think Hydro could be a close second for Silver, since I think there's a bit of justice in his desire to have Fae and humans get along, but I think this aspect of his character could also be spun in terms of freedom. After all, transcending the boundaries of species stereotypes allows both humans and Fae a degree of freedom they don't currently have. To understand each other means you can work together better, you can intermingle more, and you aren't a victim to your dispositions. On a more superficial note, I think Silver's special magic also feels very airy, like you float through that interdimensional dream corridor to get to different dreams, up, in the clouds, with the birds and the sunset. It's just a very Animo thing to me. There's an airy quality that surrounds Silver, which might just be because he's an airhead, or it could be that he doesn't seem as tied down by preconceived notions as some other characters. Silver tries to understand others, tries to consider other perspectives outside of his own, and he attempts to lift up others like we can see in the conclusion of the Spectral Soiree event where Silver gives a shout out to Jamil for his help. Silver is light, polite, and a tiny bit tragic, yet I think he not only transcends his past in Lilia's dream, but I am fully convinced that once Book 7 is concluding, that he is going to be the one that frees Malleus from his overblot. I don't actually know how it ends. Book 7 has not been finished as of this script's recording. I just can't envision anyone else playing that sort of role at this point in time, given the everything else about Silver, especially when he's compared to the rest of the cast. So hopefully this Animo boy can give Malleus and everyone else their freedom back once we get to the end of that book. Lilia, what box are we putting you into today? This old man gives me so many headaches when it comes to these types of considerations because he fits into so many different boxes that it's hard to single him out for a particular thing. But given his past and the strict discipline that he's practiced for most of his life, I can't help but feel like Geo would be appropriate here. The Lilia we get to see throughout a majority of the game is fun, goofy, mischievous, and while he sometimes has moments of depth, it's easy to write him off as a silly little guy due to his various pranks. However, Lilia is also hundreds of years old, so while he could have manifested his vision shortly before NRC, I don't think that he did. Rather, I think it would have been much more likely for him to have manifested it during the war or during his quest to hatch Malleus. The latter is what caused his special magic to manifest, right? So I think in this crossover it would stand to reason that past Lilia would be the one to obtain the vision, and due to his past, I feel that Geo is the most well-suited. This is largely based on the assumption that he would have received the vision at the same time as his special magic and not after Melinor's death. Since Lilia is so defeated when the council berates him and is so lost to his grief, I don't think he would have had a strong enough desire at that point in time to create Cryo or a different vision. This could be an interesting story in and of itself, as he could resent the power for coming to him in that moment instead of when he needed it to protect his loved ones, and that sort of angsty story is certainly appealing, but since we know exactly when and how Lilia discovered his own special magic in the canon of TWST, I want to preserve that moment and that desire with his vision, and the element that I thought resonated with it, and all of Lilia's efforts up till that point, was Geo. Pyro was another consideration I had, given the family and legacy aspects of it. However, I don't think Lilia focusing on Malleus would necessarily relate this desire to the legacy of the Briar Valley. Even after Malleus's hatching, Lilia chooses to deliberately obscure certain truths from the dragon to protect him, doing the same thing with Silver. This protection directly cuts them off from their legacies and from their ancestors, to varying degrees. So given what y'all have informed me about for Pyro, I just don't think that it would make sense given that his actions are contradictory to this meaning. Geo, on the other hand, supposedly resonates with hard workers and protectors, and I think these aspects can be much more easily connected to Lilia during the time he would have presumably gotten this vision. He's dedicated and a loyal servant of the crown before Melinor's death, and he works tirelessly, albeit begrudgingly, in that pursuit. Even long after he's banished from the capital, there is still a sense of duty that lays dormant in Lilia, one that gets reawakened as he becomes more and more invested in Malleus's survival. He pursues the goal of hatching Malleus as if it is his sole focus for hundreds of years, dedicating his life quite literally to the cause. It is in this pursuit that Lilia awakens his power, this Geo vision, and with it he was able to shield himself from Malleus's pre-hatch tantrum. Only Lilia's steadfast determination could reach Malleus at that time of crisis. Only Lilia was dedicated enough to this pursuit to approach Malleus at this critical junction without fear. And the newish power he gained that was born from this desire, I think, would have been very sweet to have protected him as he was approaching. I think nowadays Lilia flaunts this vision in front of others to confuse them, because for all intents and purposes, modern Lilia seems like he'd be any other vision besides Geo. However, he's still dedicated to ensuring Malleus's survival, to ensuring that all those he cares about are protected, and perhaps capitalize on others' misunderstandings regarding his power for pranks and other little things, you never know. Last but not least is Malleus, who perhaps surprisingly, perhaps not, is going to be receiving a cryo vision. There is naturally a duty within him that ties to the crown that I think Malleus is pursuing in earnest, which can tie him to my initial take on this element. But I also think that Malleus is someone who doesn't understand just how loved he is, and this perceived lack of love impacts a lot of his actions. This is also, in my mind, a part of the reason that he is so attached to Lilia and is doing all the things that he's doing in Book 7. The Tsaritsa is someone who has lost her love, so Dainsleif says. So I think this aspect of the element could resonate really well with Malleus. After all, he was alone on the day of his birth, or so he's been told. And because he's a monarch, a lot of his other actions have been heavily scripted. He couldn't enjoy his birthday with his grandmother when he was young, which likely wouldn't have been as much of a problem if the other staff could have celebrated it with him, but they couldn't. I can understand this from a favoritism perspective and the practicality of such a thing, but what it effectively did was leave Malleus alone, without love, without importance. And given how young I believe it's assumed that he was at this particular moment in time when he's recounting the story, the temper tantrum was basically an inevitability. And what happened when he was sad in this way, when his heart was neglected, when there wasn't any warmth from love? Malleus throws things, even people, almost killing them. Without Lilia saving the day and shifting the tragedy into a celebration, things could have been so much worse. And Lilia ends up creating a very valuable teaching moment out of the whole fiasco. It makes sense to me to have this moment, one so lacking in love and care, to be the moment that this vision manifests for Malleus. Even to this day, he freezes things when he gets upset, causing it to snow around Ramshackle as he contemplates the potential loss of Lilia. So this vision felt the most natural for me to give him. It does seem counterintuitive to have the lack of love be what gives out the vision associated with love, as I'm not sure that anyone besides Dainsleif and like the player really understands that happened with the Tsaritsa. I mean, maybe Venti, but like the Archons are kind of on their own thing anyway. Like if I was just a person living in Mondstadt, I don't think I'd really be concerned about the emotions and motivations of the Tsaritsa, you know? And I think this vision would have been skewed by the crown and Malleus's retainers as proof of Malleus's love for his people in some sort of twisted rationalization of the massive freezing powers he unlocked. And this supposed love might even be a concept Malleus clings to ground himself. I don't know. But the cold, ice, and love, regardless of whether it's felt, are themes with Mal, so I'm gonna keep Cryo for this consideration. And with that, we have given all of the main cast all of their lovely visions, at least the ones that I think would suit them. As always, I'm curious about your opinions, so please let me know down below if you think that my picks are accurate or if you think there are other visions better suited. While you're there, please let me know if you liked this video and want more content like it. If comments aren't your thing, you could of course like and subscribe instead. And as always, before you go, I'd just like to remind you that you're amazing and I hope you have a wonderful day.